press the bell icon on the YouTube app to ensure you never miss a new video from News Laundry. Hello and welcome to this NL interview. We have with us today Colin Gonsalves, a Supreme Court lawyer, and why we have him today here is because on the 1st of September, Supreme Court is going to hear a case with regard to ratification of the International Convention Against Torture. So, welcome to NL Interviews, Colin. And first of all, tell us, where did it all start? Why did it all start?
Well, it started because Ashwini Kumar, the former law minister, filed a petition in the Supreme Court, and we didn't particularly agree with some things there. It was a good petition, no doubt. It was a pretty decent petition, but we didn't agree with some of the things that he said there. And we felt that some of the arguments that he was making would be detrimental to his own cause in the Supreme Court. But the other reason why I'm there is quite by accident, because I happen to be sitting in the court. And Chief Justice K.R. turned to me and said, we'll appoint you as amicus. And a very funny thing happened. He actually said, we'll appoint you as amicus so that you can give us an unbiased view.
Okay.
To which Ashwini Kumar stood up and said, he'll be unbiased, does it mean I'm biased? To which Chief Justice laughed and said to give us a holistic view of the whole thing. Because I'm scarcely unbiased, I'm quite biased in this whole thing. So holistic view is all right, so I can give you a holistic view. So that's how I came into the case.
And what is the petition exactly about?
See, the petition asks for an order of the court directing the government to ratify CAT. So in that sense, it's okay. But there's also some direction seeking an order to, let's say, government to introduce a bill and have an act passed, which according to our Indian law, you can't direct Parliament to enact a law and so on. And according to my point of view, you don't need a law at all. You can ratify straight away.
So when did India sign the International Convention Against Torture first?
20 years ago.
97. And from then till now, what all has happened in the 20 years?
Oh, India's been doing its own trickery that it does in India. Make a promise, don't keep it. Make a promise, break it. Make a promise, break it. Repeat promises. And they've done it for 20 years. So 97 they ratify. And when you ratify, they sign. When they sign, according to the UN principles, it's a bona fide intention in good faith to ratify. That means you're expected. Internationally, you sign 2, 3, 4, 5 years, you ratify. You take some time and ratify, not 20 years. Right? So that's the first thing when you sign. So 97 they signed. 2008 they said we will ratify. Can you imagine? 2008 all the countries
11 years later they said they will ratify.
All the countries said in a periodic review, universal periodic review, they said India should ratify. India said, and it used the word supported. Okay. That is to say, it supported the resolution of the countries. So there were some 10 resolutions of groups of countries, and they said supported. 2011. Then in 2011, India played another trick on the UN, which is India wanted to get on the Human Rights Council, which is august body of really, shining stars in the democratic world. So India wanted to get on there. And to get on there, if you don't sign CAT, there'll be problems. So what did India do? India voluntarily pledged to ratify CAT. Can you imagine 2011, 6 years ago?
6 years ago.
So you pledge. So India comes on the Human Rights Council, plays its role and all that. 6 years later, you find that they bluffed the UN. They lied to the UN.
But what about the bill that came up against torture in 2010? There was a draft bill that was put up in front of the Lok Sabha, which was also passed by the Lok Sabha, but it got stalled in the Rajya Sabha.
That's right. See, this is all a game governments play actually. It's a game governments play and it's a red herring. See, the bill was an extraordinary bill. It was a good bill. So if you look at the draft of the bill, it's excellent.
This is the 2010 bill you're talking.
Correct. Excellent bill. It redefines torture. Because in the Indian Penal Code, you'll hear government law officers saying, we'll just amend the Indian Penal Code. Because the Indian Penal Code speaks of hurt and grievous hurt. So you must break a bone or bleed and things like that. But torture is not like that.
Even mental torture and all is not a part of the IPC.
No, physical torture. Suppose in Kashmir, what they do in Kashmir, they take a Kashmiri, make him stand out in the snow in the night without clothes. That's torture. Food deprivation is torture. Sound bombardment and deprivation of sleep is torture.
Yeah.
Waterboarding. You don't break anything.
Yeah.
And mental torture, of course, is torture. So the bill was excellent because it defined torture in a very broad way. So it's quite good. But it's a red herring. Why?
What's a red herring? If you could tell us?
Yeah, it's a red herring. Why? Because it's the usual excuse of all governments, and particularly this government now. It's an excuse that we cannot ratify unless we pass an act in Parliament. Get it? No?
Okay.
Precondition for ratification is
Passing the bill.
So I studied that, and I found umpteen UN documents, Human Rights Council documents, Human Rights Committee documents, umpteen documents, telling the world at large that it is a misunderstanding. Ratify today and promise to do the law later, no problem. You can ratify today and do the law later. In fact, that's better. Why? Because when you ratify, then while making the law, the other countries will also come in and say, we did this, we did that, don't make a mistake here, change that clause there, etc.
And what is the implication if we ratify first and then come up with the legislation? Why is there a hesitation?
Correct. Why is the Indian government so loath to, let's say, to ratify? Ratification opens you up to an international process of transparency. It takes you from India's standard on torture, which is down in the garbage pits. It takes you up to an international standard. Suddenly countries start looking at you very carefully. You have to give reports and countries will comment.
So you're open to international scrutiny?
Not only that, you have to raise your standard on torture to an international level. For example, you saw that BBC video in Manipur, that policeman who said, I killed 100 people. Why did you do that? My officer told me to do that. If he tells you again to do it, will you do it? Yes, I'll do it. Now you can't do that. Once you sign, ratify CAD, nobody can say, my officer told me to kill somebody, my officer told me to torture somebody. You understand? The whole scenario changes.
Okay. And what are the recommendations made by the UN Human Rights Council for the International Convention Against Torture for India?
Ratify. They have only one word suggestion. They are constantly telling India to ratify, and the governments are getting, let me put it mildly, they're getting very upset that India comes back every time and pretends to be an angel for human rights, and then promises to ratify and not ratify. And India's torture graph is also going up.
So if you could throw some light on the bill that we were talking about, which was passed by Lok Sabha, got stalled in Rajya Sabha, and then the government's changed. So what is the status right now?
That's gone. That bill has been withdrawn. So that bill has gone because the whole system changed after the elections and so on.
Yeah.
Present government has the strength to make the bill tomorrow. You already have a bill, you can just make it tomorrow. But let me tell you, Government of India has no intention of ratifying. No intent. So if we don't succeed in the Supreme Court to force India to ratify, and my argument is very simple, you made promises to the international community, for God's sake.
True.
Gramophone company case that India is bound to march in tune with the Committee of Nations. You can't make a promise and not keep it. So I'm asking for it, for a direction to government to ratify. May happen, may not. If it doesn't happen, India is not going to ratify CAT for many, many years to come. This is a government that is not incompatible with the torture regime. Basically, not incompatible. They're quite comfortable with people torturing everybody all over the place.
So as of now, is there any section in the IPC that can deal with torture, physical torture, custodial torture, any form of torture?
There is. For example, if you torture me and you break my bone, or you torture me, I get some injuries, physical bodily injuries, yes.
But there has to be a physical
provision.
evidence to...
There has to be physical, but the Convention Against Torture in the bill is much wider. than just physical injuries and so on.
But if you could throw some light on what are those sections that deal with torture currently that we have in our IPC?
That is the provision for hurt, provision for grievous hurt.
Okay.
That's it.
That's
End
all.
of story. That's all.
Okay.
So like I said, suppose I keep you standing on one leg, like the normal torture technique. You stand on one leg, keep on standing on one leg. Or I put your head underwater.
That won't
Or I
have
take
any
a-
physical evidence.
Or, actually third party involvement in torture. For example, suppose you're not touched. They bring your daughter. They bring your wife. I've handled cases. Son and mother, they strip the mother in front of the son. You'll show no injury on your body. The police are very sophisticated. You don't need to see anything. And then what is that's torture?
And like you said, so what is the police's stand on a bill, a torture bill, or about the International Convention Against Torture?
See, our police force is very barbaric. Very barbaric. If you see Game of Thrones, something like that.
That's a great reference.
Yeah. Our police force doesn't want any law. They don't want any monitoring. They don't want any control. They don't want the Convention Against Torture. Hurry, forget that. Just look at Prakash Singh's case. Judgment passed some 9 years ago. It requires police complaints authorities to be set up. We are fighting a case in the Supreme Court now. 9 years those complaints authorities have not been set up. And what does the central government say? The suggestion is not meaningful. Binding order of Supreme Court, and what do they say? These suggestions are not meaningful. You're just adding to, there are so many institutions in the country. There's an NHRC, there's a State Human Rights Commission, you're adding to it. Can you imagine? That's the reply they filed in the Supreme Court. Your suggestion that you made, binding order, is not meaningful.
So, which country, according to you, has the best laws against torture? A country that we can probably take a...
Well, 161 countries in the world have signed the convention. Europe is relatively good on issues relating to torture. I don't say Pakistan is good at all, but Pakistan has ratified. Sri Lanka, all the countries have ratified. We are with Sudan, can you imagine? We are hanging around with countries like Sudan in not ratifying. But the whole of Europe is pretty good.
Okay.
Many countries in the developing world in South America are pretty good because they went through periods, like Argentina went through periods of torture, Chile went through Pinochet and periods of torture. So many countries in South America had military regimes and many people were tortured. But wonderful judgments have come out against torture in South America. Okay. A country like South Africa, which went through such large-scale torture, has come out of torture. Not totally, but has come out of torture. And why should India, the largest democracy in the world, still remain in a torture regime?
April, when Supreme Court, a bench of two judges, Justice Kehar and Justice Chandrachud, were hearing a case, the same PIL, Mr. Kumar's PIL. I don't know if you were there when Justice Chandrachud said that it's high time that India has a legislation against torture. And from then on, April 2017, when Justice Chandrachud pushed for it, is when this hearing has come up now in September. So even the judiciary seems to be, pushing for a legislation against torture.
I hope so. I was there that day. I was there because I was appointed amicus by the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
I hope, it's anybody's guess, but I hope that they put their foot down and say enough is enough. Time has come.
And so I just wanted you to throw some light on whether or not this International Convention Against Torture and the draft bill that we had in 2010, did it have any mention of mental torture on women and children? Yes, it has.
It has very expanded definition of torture, and it includes juveniles, women, children, everything it includes. It's a wide definition of torture.
And so how many states in India were in support?
Everybody.
Every
in
state?
Fact, correct.
I would like to bring in
can you imagine?
Even states which have AFSPA.
Can you imagine? It is there in the Select Committee report that all the states have agreed to bring in the law.
Okay.
And now with BJP government in the center and the states, every state will say, no, we don't want the law. Can you imagine?
So back in 2010, you're saying that every state was on board?
Yes, it's there in writing in the Select Committee minutes. It's there in writing in the Law Minister's notes.
Okay.
that every state was consulted on the new law, and every state agreed.
So every state stand was that yes, they are
Yes.
in agreement. But
Yes.
so what could have happened?
And that it's not good enough to just amend the penal code. You must have a comprehensive new law. Every state said that.
So what do you think will come out of the current petition that is going to be heard?
I have no idea, I tell you.
What is your expectation?
My expectation is that the court should say, today, tell me. Are you going to ratify or not going to ratify? If you're going to ratify, tell me when. Give me a time. And order. On the next date, not waiting anymore. Enough is enough. You will immediately ratify. Once the Supreme Court said, Union of India will ratify the Convention Against Torture, that's the end of the story. And we waited too long. Now is the time to show impatience with this government and say, enough is enough.
Could you tell our viewers a little about the kind of torture that a lot of people in a lot of parts of our country go through, so that we can create some awareness on what people go through and why we need this law or ratification of this convention?
See, there is absolutely no doubt that India, the torture graph is rising. I say that because Supreme Court judgments, there are at least about 30, 40 judgments of the Supreme Court that say, day in and day out, we hear of awesome stories of torture. So the torture graph is just going way up, despite
So
underreporting.
do you have any data to corroborate that from 1997 when we signed the convention till today, 20 years from
There will
then?
be data. I don't have it offhand, but there will be data to show a rising, despite underreporting. Despite you can see the torture graph of custodial deaths that's rising. So deaths in police station, deaths in Tihar. Take Tihar, 33 deaths last year in Tihar. And I'm doing a case where we've demonstrated that India has one of the highest rates of custodial deaths in the world.
Okay, and
Highest.
is that why India is never preferred as a destination for extradition?
Correct. See, and there are many cases. Europe will no longer extradite anyone to India.
Why
if
is
there's
that?
a chance of a death sentence. Because in Bulla's case, the government tricked the German government. Indian government told them, no, there's no question of death sentence. The moment he landed on India's soil, they put a charge on him and gave him death. So the German government was very upset. You tricked us. We are not allowed to extradite anyone to a country which will put a man to death. You promised that you'll give him anything but the death sentence. You could have given him life. But India doesn't bother about his promises and assurances. So they gave him death. And there are other cases where extradition has been refused on the grounds that torture is endemic in India. Specifically.
Could you give us an example?
I don't remember it offhand, but there are 2 or 3 examples.
Okay.
Yeah, where the government said that torture is reported to be widespread in India. And they look at what? They look at NHRC reports, they look at all the official reports, and they look at the Supreme Court judgments. They don't have to ask any NGO for that. And therefore, since India has not ratified the Convention Against Torture, we will not extradite the person to India. And Justice Keir, Chief Justice Keir, mentioned in court, he says, we know of cases people are not being extradited because you've not ratified the convention. When the UN itself is telling you don't have to make a law, you can ratify and then make a law, and so many countries have done it.
So is there a particular deadline of when you ratify?
No, there's no deadline, but it's a good faith commitment.
Okay.
Which means, okay, some countries took 2 years, some countries took 4 years, some countries took 5 years, but there's a good faith commitment. You were moving in that direction. India is moving in the reverse direction. You pledged in 2011 a solemn pledge. That's not just a promise, it's a solemn pledge. And now you're going backwards.
So as the amicus curiae, what are your final words about the hearing that's going to happen on September 1st? And again, what you expect?
See, I never expect anything. I always, I'm reconciled to anything what happens. I always hope that something will come out. I'm optimistic in that sense. But I know that sometimes your dreams don't come true, at all. This is a case where India should be forced to ratify. I'm dead sure about that. Dead sure. International Committee is dead sure. But I hope the courts live up to what the expectations are.
Okay, thank you so much for talking to News Laundry, Mr.
Thank you.
Colin.